Well, let's get more on this story with Ahmed Mitchell, who's the National Deputy Executive Director of the Council on American-Islamic Relations. Biden has attacked the ICC arrest warrant application as, quote, outrageous. And of course, the US isn't a party to the ICC. As an American, Edward, and a lawyer, how do you find that kind of language and response from the president of your country directed towards the ICC?
Sadly, what's outrageous is the president's response. It has been obvious to anyone with eyes for 8 months that the Israeli government was intent on committing a genocide and has been committing a genocide. We know this because the Israeli defense minister said very early on that he was cutting off all food, fuel, water, electricity, and other basic necessities to all of Gaza because he was fighting, quote unquote, human animals. And the Israeli prime minister justified the war on Gaza by comparing it to a biblical story about a genocide that the kingdom of Israel supposedly committed against one of its enemies. So we knew early on that they planned to commit a genocide, and they spent 8 months committing a genocide, killing at least 40,000 Palestinians, most of the women and children. So the ICC arrest warrant application is perfectly reasonable. It's sound, and the president's response is what is outrageous.
Some have said that the US response shows that America is selective in who it thinks should face international justice or to whom it should apply. After all, Biden welcomed the ICC warrant for Vladimir Putin and other Russian officials. Do you agree that the US is selective, and do you find that problematic?
Well, I believe the American people are morally consistent. The American people want the genocide in Gaza to end, just like they want Russia's invasion of Ukraine to end. The inconsistent individuals are President Biden and many people in his administration who are not morally consistent and don't mind being utterly hypocritical about this issue. The president said that the ICC warrant against Vladimir Putin was justified. Mr. Putin has committed horrific war crimes in Ukraine. He hasn't killed nearly as many civilians as Benjamin Netanyahu has in Gaza in just 8 months. So the discrepancy here, the moral inconsistency is incredibly frustrating, not only to people around the world, but to the American people. President Biden's position does not represent the American people. Most Americans want this genocide to end, and they want our government to support human rights for everyone, no matter whether they're Israeli, Palestinian, or any other nationality.
How likely do you think it is that this arrest warrant will be granted? And if it is, where does that leave Biden and his position? Is it still tenable?
I suspect the Israeli government is going to be putting massive amounts of pressure behind the scenes on the ICC not to actually approve these arrest warrants. And the ICC must reject outside pressure. We even had 12 members of Congress in the United States threaten to sanction and target the ICC, if they fulfilled their duty by investigating and charging Netanyahu. So that kind of pressure is unacceptable. The court must reject it. And if the court does issue arrest warrants, nations around the world should enforce them and make sure Netanyahu knows he is isolated and that this genocide must end. I don't think the warrants will stop President Biden from continuing to enable this genocide. Only pressure from the American people will do that. And I'll tell you, here in America, we're putting all the pressure we can on the president to get him to stop this violence for the sake of our country, the people of Palestine, and people around the world.
Ahmed Mitchell from Georgia, many thanks for joining us on TRT World.